All right, now I've got the recording going. So thanks everyone for showing up again to the working group forum. The document is up and I will once again link it in the chat for everyone to drop topics in. If you don't feel like dropping a topic directly in there or cannot, then you can drop it in the chat and I will add it for you. But let's switch over to that. Looks like we have a few topics right now. And we're going to have a few minutes to add some more if we'd like to. Give it just a couple more minutes. All right. Well, while people continue to add things, we can probably get started with our first topic, which has a bunch of details. So this should be fun and meaty. RBAC-related flakes and envtest tests. So we have a bunch of notes. Test setup is creating RoleBinding in a namespace immediately after the namespace is created. So it isn't related to HNC propagation. Chores aren't running anyway. Does it take a significant amount of time for K8s to process the RoleBinding and apply it? There's a PR and then some additional notes about flakes and ED tests run locally, and some notes about read consistency. So anyone that has thoughts, go for
it. I think maybe this original topic was added by Dave, who isn't here. I know that he put in the PR to essentially do a wait loop. I think that's the PR that's linked there is, I think, Dave's PR, which kind of does a little bit of waiting around after we make stuff
I guess from our perspective, I can explain a little bit our thought process. We noticed this PR. So basically the PR introduced eventuallys in a couple of helpers for like creating roles and other things. I'm not sure if it was just for roles. So basically the idea is you send a create request to Kubernetes using a K8s client. And then there is eventually loop trying to get the thing for a certain period. And this, like the intent of such a change in our heads was kind of implying that the operation in K8s is not synchronous, which felt wrong in our opinion, because like when you send a request to K8s, it returns 200, which is pretty much okay. And then you should be immediately able to get the thing. And I think like if the K8s serve the K8s API is following the HTTP spec, it should be returning 202 with a polling location header if their intent was to be asynchronous. So we did a quick experiment yesterday and today, basically reverted that commit, but replaced the eventually with a plain get, like plain expect get this thing. And we thought this should fail sooner or later if the eventually is needed, right? Because you create the object, then immediately try to get it. And we ran this in a loop. We were able to run it for a lot of times, like, I don't know, like 50 runs or even more. We hit different flakes. Sometimes the env testing is crashing because ports cannot be allocated, but that's not related. And sometimes we got the 401, 402, I don't remember, but like a forbidden status. But it never failed to get things immediately after creation. So this experiment kind of suggests that this eventually is not really needed, but also uncovers some sort of eventualness, like eventual consistency after you create the object. So the object's pretty much there, but it's not in effect immediately. And we think this probably uncovers like two different problems. Like, first of all, our suspicion if the eventually is needed is one thing. And another thing, what do we do is this eventual consistency, like, do we need to worry about this in production code in the actual handlers? Because users might create roles and then they won't be authorized immediately. So that's another, I think, orthogonal question. So that's our, that's what's been concerning us. I guess that's the reason for this kind of thread in the agenda.
What was your cluster setup in these tests? Because like I guess the fact is it is eventually consistent. Like Kubernetes, the Kubernetes API will accept writes, but depending on how many etcd nodes you have and like how many Kubernetes API servers you have and which nodes they're connected to, like the reads will will take some time to actually reflect that. And I think
This
it
is in
depends a lot.
envtest.
Yeah,
this,
so
It has
Yes,
two
yes.
etcds, one API server.
so since that's all local, like I would expect it to be very fast, but like in a real cluster, I would expect these problems to be worse probably. Just because of like networks and propagation between the etcds and stuff.
So the interesting thing was we never saw get after create fail. So that was 100% consistent, but we did see the forbidden flake. So even though we successfully got the role wasn't applied when we tried to do something that required it. So because the problem's happening within the API server.
Mhm.
So doing an eventually polling for our client to see a thing doesn't seem to make any difference at all to it.
Yeah, I wonder if locally the get after create is because the client's doing something like client side with like knowing it should exist.
I don't think it does though. So I've looked into the code a bit. Even if you've got caching on, the create avoids the cache and the get reads from the cache. So that waits for a watch to populate the cache. But yeah, we don't have a cache yet.
Is there a chance that like let's say you have two etcds and you create the role and it ends up in etcd 1. And then you get the role, you get it from etcd 1, but then when it's time to use the role for RBAC purposes, it looks for it in etcd 2 or something like that? Like, it's really weird that you can get the role. Like, what else would need to happen if the role is there? And I would assume the RBAC code looks for roles in etcd. Like, what's the extra step that is needed for the role to be effective, as we say? Like, it's also terrible that we need to know so many. Like, we need to actually be aware of so many details of how Kubernetes works. It would be nice if we just could not. But I guess this is the world we live in.
Yeah,
I really
it's
miss Postgres.
I guess this is a possibility. Like we're thinking that maybe the role binding, because it's a resource, maybe it gets reconciled by something. But then I was like, wait, envtest doesn't run any reconcilers. So maybe you're right. Maybe it just reads it. I'm not sure. I guess we need to check in the code. I guess this could be an explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fully claim to understand the internals of what etcd is doing. It's just like on their own docs, they commit to saying like you'll receive events in the correct order, but there's no guarantee that you'll receive the most recent like version of something or event.
Yeah, we know about this. We found this as well, but we were reasoning that in envtest we expected to have only one instance of etcd, which actually proved wrong. I must say. So maybe that's actually maybe that is what's happening in the end. I'm still not sure. And I mean, what I don't get is why didn't, like, I would expect that one of these expect statements with the straight get right after create would fail. Like, why would that never fail, and we'll get the problems only later?
Yeah,
It's kind
that's a
of
good question.
Maybe we're just very lucky. I don't know. Or maybe there is something special about gets that doesn't apply to the other RBAC. Like maybe getting the resource is not the same as using the resource for RBAC purposes.
I think we also try to expand the experiment to the E2Es, like to do it against the real K8s to see how it behaves, but I don't think we finished the experiment properly. So maybe we should just run it a bit more to see if we can get more understanding. Because I mean, I mean, in the end, we can leave these eventually there, but it will still be good to know what's happening and where the weights and the polling should be and where
The
they don't.
eventually fix the test, though, don't they? Not the symptom that you could get if you were just scripting against the API.
Yeah.
I mean, if we did that thing where we wrapped our clients with a retry layer, that would fix it. But then we also found there's a case where that probably wouldn't be a good thing to do. So that tactic we're using for listing resources across a cluster, where we're just going for the namespaces that have any old binding in them, and then we do a list in each one of those. If you're forbidden in any of those and you've got a retry loop going on that lasts like a few seconds, then multiply that by the number of namespaces where you're getting forbidden, and then you've got a pretty badly behaving or performing request. So that sort of wrapping needs to be opt-in for you need to know when to do it or not, which is not straightforward.
I mean, yeah, I feel like even just special casing the role endpoints and like organ space and stuff like might just be a significant win. Because like even if those endpoints are slower, it's not like, I guess what I'm saying is like I feel like the sleep and retry for those particular endpoints isn't the end of the world, because it's not like people are like doing those frequently, or they're in their critical path once you've like added a user and set stuff up. It's just in our tests they are, because we're doing that all the time, but in real life they wouldn't be.
We think we can't wait for the role to appear in a get. We have to wait for a role to be applied to a user that has that role. Or not applied, be effective for somebody that has that role, which is a trickier thing to wait for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess the other wrinkle I would add is, I'm not sure if it's related or not, but I've been noticing a weird failure when I run locally against kind, where we create an org and then we create a space in that org. And in spite of the fact that we, in various versions of the code, had two different loops waiting for the user to have permission to list things in the org, and also waiting for a role binding to appear in the test code, I was still seeing 422 errors creating the space, which means that like we get through creating the org, we wait for the role binding to appear like a couple different ways, and then we go to create the space, and some part of the code is thinking that the org doesn't exist. You know, it's a different user, I think, in that like namespace reconciler, like it's all using the admin client. So I don't know if it's related to that, but we're still seeing some strange flakes there with things not being consistent in a way that is hard to fathom. Now, it seemed to pass in CI, so I don't know if this is just a local thing, but I've seen it crop up a couple times running those kind tests.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. I'd be curious to see what else y'all turn up, since you said you're going to continue digging a little bit. I do think it's worth trying to understand the source of these things rather than just trying to band-aid them, since it has implications of just how we set up tests in general, not just the role binding stuff. So yeah, hopefully we can get some more information on this at some point. Any more thoughts on this, or shall we let us noodle about it and move on to the next topic? All right, sounds like we're gonna noodle and move on. There is a question about progress on the name.
Yeah, I put this on here. I was just curious what we were at. I don't know. I see Christian on here. I don't know if anybody has a update or anything.
I reached out to LF Legal and I pinged them again. I haven't heard back just yet. So I will make sure to talk to them sometime this week and see what kind of trademark due diligence we need to do for that. I did a quick domain search and it looks like the obvious ones aren't taken, but we can do a subdomain. I think that's fine. I think we need a top level thing for this. So, but yeah, I certainly hope, to be able to reach out later this week and say this name looks good or not.
Awesome. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Cool. That'll be a good day once we have a name that rolls off the tongue.
Like beef roast.
Yes, beef roast. Bifrost.
We'll have to cut a special for
Announcing it that way.
vegetarians.
Oh dear. Cool. So there's another topic that's losing approver status, question mark?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this because we had a teammate from SAP leave relatively recently, Mario, and I noticed that he's still in the approvers list. So my first instinct was, okay, he's left SAP, so maybe I should PR to get rid of him in that list. We offboarded him from everywhere else. But then I thought, actually, I think the status is not connected to the company necessarily, and he still qualifies as an approver. So what do I do? Does it mean that we get to keep our approver status until we die, or is there? I guess we don't have a process for losing status. So maybe I should just keep him there until we figure it out, I guess.
I would think his CLA would need to be re-signed, right? Because he'll have some sort of corporate CLA.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, but that's kind of a minor. He could sign or they could sign an individual CLA, or the new employer could sign a CLA, but they would have to sign an individual CLA on their next pull request. But I don't think that would necessarily affect the approver status.
That means his company, since he's resigned, his company will have to take him out from their own company CLA. It's kind of on them. Right.
I think this happened already. We kind of saw this in a PR. I had to eventually remove him as an author of one of the commits because it wouldn't get through. But I guess if we take the question is still valid. If it wasn't him, but somebody else who just changed companies but continued working in the same area, then they'll resign the CLA and they'll be able to do it again. So I guess we'll still have to come up with something maybe after a certain period the status is lost, or maybe just not lost. I guess it's up to everyone to decide.
Yeah, I think the general thing is we don't have a system right now for managing the approvers, maintainers of the project, since it's still relatively new. So we should probably talk about that in general and come up with a system and criteria for, if you want to maintain your maintainer status, then what kinds of duties do you have with the project, et cetera. And what's the process for offboarding someone if they are not planning on continuing to work on the project?
Yeah, a bunch of that should be kind of, we always have pretty definitive guidance across the CFF. I just dropped a link into the approver section from the rules description. But I think even what's in here isn't particularly clear about losing those roles, like what you would need to do to maintain that once you're no longer actively contributing. I think that we've maybe intentionally left that vague. I would expect that, if maybe it's just show of judgment from any approver if they're no longer active in an area, they can eventually opt themselves out of that role because they're not performing those duties anymore. But technically, I think right now that is up to the individual person with that role.
It does say that you are expected to be active, basically. So
yeah.
I don't know after how long you decide that the person is not active anymore. We could conventionally decide it's a year, 6 months, whatever. But
yeah, I
it's a
mean,
bit too soon.
one issue I see with the CF on K8s work in particular is that it's all changing so fast. So if you're gone for 3 months and you come back, then your technical context is going to be pretty stale. So you probably shouldn't be an approver. But again, maybe that's just worth a conversation. You know, at least we know his GitHub handle. We have some way of getting in touch with him.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'm gonna wait a little bit, and then I don't expect him to be interested in contributing. So I'll just wait a little bit and then get in touch with him and tell him, hey, I think I'm going to remove you. What do you think about it? So,
Cool. That's a good topic of discussion. I'm glad this came up just for our future purposes. All right, moving forward. Brand new roadmap board with a nice link in there.
yeah, I created a board to act as the roadmap. So I'm basically trying to introduce the concept of epics on the open source project as well. So what I've done is I have created issues that are tagged as epic, and each epic issue also has another label, which is the label associated with all the stories in that epic. And I've assigned each epic issue to the epic anchor. And if it looks funny, it's because I'm using the new GitHub project beta thing, which looks pretty neat, but it's different from what you used to. You can switch to a more, if you click on the arrow next to the roadmap tab name, you can switch back to a board view if you prefer it. Yeah, just a heads up that it's there now. So like, kind of gives everyone a clearer idea of what we're working on, what are the next things we're going to work on. And I've kind of established this life cycle for an epic. So, you know, first thing, an epic should be proposed. Then once it's accepted, stories should be created for it. Then once the stories are ready, it's ready to be worked on, and then we work on it, and then it's done. So, yeah. Ideally, we would start each epic with a proposal, which we can link in the epic issue. So everything should kind of work out. Today I was at the TOC, like the meeting before this one, and actually there's a proposal to standardize the project, like the board format for all projects in the foundation. So so that every project is kind of expected to have a board similar to what we already had with like the project status, like with individual issues and PRs, etc. And then a roadmap board for higher level stuff. I did this completely, I was ignoring everything that thing happened, but like we're lucky to be pretty lined up. I think the idea is eventually for the foundation to have some automation in place so that when every working group gets these boards automatically created for them. But I think we should be able to just keep our ones as long as they are close enough to what they're expected to be. So yeah, I guess the hopefully, like as we come up with new epics, they're gonna show up here, and people have like a long-term idea of where we're headed, which was not possible to get just by looking at the board, because the board is like full of details and pretty chaotic. This one is like a nice bird's eye view.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for doing that. I know definitely some people will be happy about having a decluttered view so they can see where things are going. And I think we're actually getting to a point where this is feasible, because, you know, a couple months ago, it was just sort of tons of things were getting pulled out of the pile and done. So it was pretty chaotic to even project forward. So this, I think, is coming in at the right time. So,
yeah, I tried to reverse engineer the existing epics. So like if you see, please go and look at the epics and Oh yeah, so the link is in the document, but I'm also gonna link it in the chat. Now I was saying, if you notice any story is out of place or missing or whatever, like please go on and fix it, because I did it today. I did it this morning. I think I have all of them, but if anything is missing, or if you think there are other epics that should show up here, then go on and add them. The format should be relatively straightforward.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look if anyone else wants to as well. But it's definitely worth getting this aligned and keeping it updated for everyone to see.
Yeah, I really like the new GitHub thing. We might eventually migrate the other board to this. It's a bit more flexible. It's got more features. You can add custom fields to issues. You can group issues by those custom fields. You can add workflows to automate transactions, etc. But at the moment, they don't provide a migration tool, and I don't want to add every story by hand. So I just wait until I guess they will force us into it. Or I guess if one day I'm feeling particularly keen, I will do it manually, or maybe I can script it, but there's no straightforward way that I can see, unfortunately.
See if they have an API for it.
They definitely have an API, so maybe I can whip something up, but
yeah, we'll see.
I know that I'm gonna do that, and the next day a nice button is gonna come out that does it. So
that's just the way of things.
I'm gonna wait, I think, for a bit.
Cool. Yeah, well, we'll see. Obviously, it shouldn't just be you pushing that forward. So I'll definitely help you out with that. And anyone else that wants to join in.
And I feel as long as as each epic anchor or track anchor. Ooh, 404. Let me see. Maybe I need to make it public or something. Anyway, I was saying, like, as long as each epic anchor makes sure that like their epic looks okay, like all stories are there and everything is labeled properly, then we should be good. Actually, manage access. I'm the only. Sorry, I'll figure out access so that it's public. Like it looks like. Am I the only one who can see it? No, like you're seeing it.
I can see it, but if I open it and
maybe only members of the org, then how do I? This thing is very beta, unfortunately.
So but that's something to.
Yeah, it's private. Okay, manage. Public. Boom. Try again. It should now be visible to everyone.
Yep. Cool.
Voila. Okay.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, that's all good. I like this. It's also something we can refer to in the coming weeks as a quick check-in for where things are.
Yeah, I could not use milestones for individual epics because if you add an issue to a milestone, then you have to, it can only live in one milestone at a time, basically. So I decided to keep milestones for releases and use labels for epics, which means it's harder to see the progress of individual epic. Although you kind of see it. If you open a label, it will show you a number of closed and open stories. It should give you an idea. But like the nice progress bar is only for milestones. So we're kind of stuck with this. There's unfortunately, the milestones are by design exclusive. One task can only live in one milestone at a time. That was the only compromise. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with this.
Solid. Well, looks like we have one more topic. If we don't have any more comments about the roadmap, but definitely check it out. Cool. It is a topic about, we started the Concourse track of chores.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we decided to do it like we've been prioritizing some chores that will make our PR turnaround faster, like optimization of the end-to-end tests, etc. And like it looks like the lack of traditional, so to say, Concourse pipeline It's introducing lots of pain points for us, and also after the health check that we had recently, we decided to just move it forward. Like we wanted to run a concourse with a vault, but now we decided to just run something, no matter if we're going to use vault or anything. We just want to move the e2is to concourse really quickly so that we can offload the GitHub action thing, the checks. We believe that the checks will be even more quick this way, which will improve our turnaround, and it has other added benefits, like we have a tool to investigate flakes. We will be deploying and running against a real cluster, which we think would be really beneficial, because kind might be behaving differently in some cases. So I just wanted to make sure you all know that's happening, and we will make sure that all the secrets, so that we can operate and look at this thing, are shared with the whole round.
Cool. Yeah, I think it makes sense. The historical context being we just tried to use GitHub Actions to use all the built-ins, and that works really well to a point, but not so awesome for the end-to-end tests we found out in a few other cases. So offloading that into a sort of a better arena is probably a good idea. But we can still keep like the unit tests and whatnot in GitHub Actions because they're really simple to run. So
yeah, we'll do this incrementally, and we'll see what makes sense after we get to the next stable point.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for getting started on that. It'll definitely alleviate some of the pain that we've been encountering. So cool. Any last minute thoughts, topics, comments, concerns? Doesn't sound like it. Sounds like everyone's either tired or sated with the information they've gotten. So let's sort of wrap this up. Again, thanks for everyone that's here today. We love seeing people here, and obviously we've gotten some good chats out of this. So just keep on showing up if you have thoughts that you want to share or questions. Hopefully we'll have that new name in the next, hopefully 2 weeks. We'll see. And then we can use the new roadmap board to do a quick check-in in 2 weeks to just see kind of where things are, which should be a fun new topic of discussion. So yeah, once again, thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.